Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, we're nearing the end of the year, and with Christmas coming up, I felt it was time to update our best of CPU picks. So I'm going to give you my CPU buying advice from the most affordable CPUs right up to the core heavy monsters. So let's get into it. But before we do, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Antec and their Performance One Full Tower eATX case. Designed to support the latest RTX 40 series graphics cards up to 400mm long, the P1 is big on the inside with loads of options for top and front mounted radiators, including the ability to support dual 360mm radiators simultaneously. The P1 comes with 4 pre-installed Storm T3 PWM fans, with the ability to expand fan support to an additional 6. It includes a temperature display, dual 4mm tempered glass side panels, cable management covers complete with Velcro straps for quick and easy cable management, and now also comes in a very clean white version. Exclusive to Amazon US, there are some excellent Black Friday discounts of up to 20% between the 20th and 24th of November. So for more information, please check the links in the video description. Right, so as usual, we'll start with the more affordable options and work our way up from there. Also, as we typically do, stuff like platform costs and potential future upgrades, that'll all be factored in, considered when discussing and making our recommendations. So, let's get into it. Starting with the entry-level category, I realize we're penny pinching here, but I also feel like it can be a waste of money buying the absolute cheapest thing possible. If something's only slightly more expensive, but much faster, it's probably worth buying. Take the Intel Core i3-10100F for example. It's currently $85 US, which is a really good price for that part, or it would be if the 12400F wasn't just $10 more. That's a mere 12% premium for a part that on average delivers over 20% better gaming performance. So my advice is if you're on a tight budget and trying to make your dollars go as far as possible, skip the 10th gen part and go right for the 12th gen Core i3. At $95 US, the 12100F is a seriously good deal. You can also purchase LGA 1700 boards for as little as $80, with decent boards able to handle Core i9 parts starting at around $120 US. Both DDR4 and DDR5 memory is quite cheap now, so I'd recommend getting DDR5, but if you want to save every last dollar, then DDR4 will get the job done. As for the AMD alternatives, there really isn't any, which is really disappointing and pretty shocking. The Ryzen 5 5500, for example, it's a pretty underwhelming CPU at $105 US. It offers similar multi-core performance to that of the 12100F with weaker gaming performance. Of course, the big advantage of the Ryzen processor is the AM4 platform, allowing you the ability to upgrade in the future to something like a Ryzen 7 5700X or maybe even a 5800X 3D. And good quality boards there can be had for $90 US. So as underwhelming as the 5500 is, it does have some redeeming qualities, being there are better CPUs available on that platform. But I think ultimately, if this is a penny pinching type exercise, then yeah, Intel's Core i3-12100F is the way I'd go. As a side note though, don't get sucked into Intel's Core i3-13100F at $120 US. It's just a refreshed 12100F, so that is to say it is the exact same CPU with a new name and $25 lumped onto the price. Okay, so the entry-level category saw us pick between the $95 Core i3-12100F and the $105 Ryzen 5 5500, but if you have more to spend, say as much as $200 US or thereabouts, there are many more viable options. I made a short list of 9 options in this price range, though 5 of them can be scrubbed from the list. The Core i5-10400F at $120, and the 11400F at $130, they're decent value options at those prices, and are maybe worth buying over the 12100F if you can spend a little bit more, but at that level of investment, I'd be more inclined to steer you towards the AM4 platform for its excellent upgrade path, and for $130 US, the Ryzen 5 5600 is just a better processor in my opinion. And the Core i5-10600K at $150, it suffers the same fate. Again, for that level of investment, the Intel LGA 1200 platform simply isn't worth it these days. On the other hand, the outgoing LGA 1700 platform can still be worth jumping on, and with the Core i5-12600KF now down to just $160 US, it's a seriously good deal, and in my opinion, it's worth spending a little bit extra over the Ryzen 5 5600, as the Intel processor generally offers better gaming performance and much better productivity performance. But countering that deal is the Ryzen 7 5700X, $160 US, which offers similar levels of gaming and productivity performance to that of the Core i5. Still, if you were to spend a little bit more on the 12600KF build by opting for higher speed DDR5 memory, that should result in better gaming performance, but it's also more costly. The 5700X does quite well with cheap DDR4 memory, and AM4 boards are dirt cheap now, and the upgrade path to Ryzen 9 or the 5800X 3D is still an option down the track. Also, for those of you looking to maximize gaming performance while keeping the budget in check, the Ryzen 5 7600 at $200, that seems like a seriously good deal to me. It can be a good bit faster than the 12600KF for gaming, though the real draw card here in my opinion is the AM5 platform and its support for future CPUs. The 12600KF is $40 US cheaper, so that's a 20% saving, but then again, the saving will be less than 20% once you factor in the cost of a motherboard and memory. So let's just get down to it. As it stands right now, the Ryzen 7 5700X at $170 US will cost you an additional $90 when you include a decent B550 motherboard and then $60 for a 32GB kit of DDR4 3600 memory, coming to a total of $320 or $280 if you opt for the Ryzen 5 3600 instead. And frankly, I'd recommend spending 14% more for an additional 33% processing power. Alternatively, the 12600KF costs just $160, then a decent DDR4 Z690 motherboard's around $120, and again $60 for a 32GB kit of DDR4 3600 memory, so $340 there. And that's about the same cost as the 5700X for a similar level of performance. Alternatively, for that option, you could go with a DDR5 Z690 motherboard, and they start at $160. And as a side note here, please don't buy the ASRock Z690 Phantom Gaming 4/D5 for $110, as it's a heap of junk. Then for a decent 32GB kit of DDR5 6000 memory, you're looking at around $90, taking the total build cost for the DDR5 configuration to $410 US, which admittedly is starting to get up there, and the roughly 20% premium over the DDR4 configuration probably isn't going to be worth it with this particular processor. Then finally, we have the $200 Ryzen 5 7600, and any B650 board works with up to a Ryzen 9 7950X, so really, you can stick the 7600 on anything, and for budget builds, I highly recommend the ASRock B650M-HDV/M.2 for $110. And again, you're looking at $90 for a 32GB kit of DDR5 6000, so a build cost there of $400, which is why I don't recommend the 12600KF with DDR5. So as good as the 12600KF DDR4 option is, I think I'd either go with the 5700X on AM4 for a total platform cost of $320, or ideally spend the extra $80 to get on AM5 with some fancy new DDR5 memory and the Ryzen 5 7600. If AMD can keep the 7600 at or around $200, then it's going to be really hard to beat. But what if you want to spend a little bit more? There's well over a dozen CPUs to pick from when looking at the $300 to $400 price range, and a lot of them do make sense, so that complicates our recommendations here. But let's start with the cheapest options available when just crossing the $200 price point. There's the Ryzen 7 5800X for $220, which we can quickly scrub off our list because the 5700X offers similar performance for a lot less money, so just get the 5700X. The 5800X really only makes sense if it's like $10 more, otherwise, yeah, just get that cheaper model. The same really goes for the Ryzen 7 7600X, though we are looking at just a $20 premium over the non-X version here, but really, it's still not worth it. You can just enable PBO on the 7600, though again, even that's hardly worth it. The more power efficient stock configuration of the 7600 is the way to go in my opinion, so just do that, save the $20. Also at $220, we find the Core i5-12500, which you just wouldn't bother with given that the 7600 is a better product, and of course, so too is the cheaper 12600KF that we talked about earlier. Now this one's interesting. The Core i7-12700KF at just $230. That seems like a pretty amazing deal. With this part, you're getting 8 12th generation P cores along with a cluster of E cores, giving you a total of 12 cores. Though of course, not all cores are equal, but still, that's a lot of processing power at $230. And generally speaking, you are looking at similar gaming and productivity performance that of the Ryzen 7 7700X, which costs $320 US. But, and the big but here is the Core i5-13600K, which offers similar productivity performance with generally better gaming results. And right now the 13600KF, it costs $250 with the standard 13600K at $270. So as good as the 12700KF appears at $230, I'd actually opt for the slightly more expensive 13th generation Core i5. I think the Core i5-13600KF at $250 is the first CPU in this price range that really makes sense. And sure, it's only roughly able to match the gaming performance of the 7600 using the same DDR5 6000 memory, but it does boast substantially better productivity performance. You're looking at having to pay around $50 more for a decent DDR5 Z690 or Z790 motherboard, so overall it is another $100 for this combo over the 7600. That's a 25% price hike at $500. Then just making it under $300 is the AMD Ryzen 9 5900X at $290, but unless you're already on the AM4 platform, this part makes little sense. For only slightly more, the Ryzen 7 7700X provides the same level of productivity performance with much better gaming performance, and of course, investing a little extra to get on the AM5 platform makes sense. Now, if you will consider just going over $300, the 7700X is a great value option at $320, and the non-X version, it actually costs a little bit more at $330, so just get the X. The only real competition here is the Core i5-14600K, which is just a rebadged 13600K, which costs just $270, so no idea why you'd pay over 20% more for the exact same thing. Now, depending on motherboard pricing, the 7700X could end up being much closer to the 13600K in price than you'd first realize. And if that is the case, the Ryzen 7 part is probably going to be the better buy. However, further complicating our choices is the Core i9 12900K and KF models, which have dropped to just $315 and $310 respectively. And I'd recommend getting the 12900K for $315 out of the two options. But despite this once being a $600 plus processor, I'm not sure I'd actually recommend it at $315, as crazy as that sounds. And the reason being that the 13600K and its newer Raptor Lake architecture almost matches the productivity performance while consuming significantly less power. And not only that, but it's also able to match the gaming performance, so I'd just go with the 13600KF at $250. Finally, there's also the 5800X3D at $320, and if I don't mention this part, a lot of you are up in arms in the comment section going, where's the beloved 5800X3D? It's such a great CPU. How is it not mentioned here? Well, yeah, it's an amazing CPU for those of you already invested in AM4, but for everyone else, the 7700X is a better choice. All said and done, this one comes down to the Core i5-13600KF or Ryzen 7 7700X for me. And depending on motherboard pricing, I could really go either way. If you can get a well-priced LGA 1700 DDR5 motherboard, then the 13600KF would be a great value option. Though the upgrade path, whatever that may be with AM5, would also drag me towards the 7700X. Though of course we just don't know how that one's going to play out, but at the very least we know there are going to be upgrades on offer there. For those of you willing to spend $400 to $500 on your CPU, you'll find some mighty powerful options from both AMD's AM5 and Intel's LGA 1700 platforms, but anything based on past, so older platforms, it's really not worth considering at this price point. And that means, anything on AM4, LGA 1200, or anything older than that, they're all very poor value choices for new system builders. If you're primarily focused on gaming performance, then really look no further than the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D. It's the best option available right now, generally beating the gaming performance of even the Core i9 14900K, and it does so at a much lower price of just $360 US. The 7900X 3D is a worse gaming CPU with just 6 cores having direct access to the stacked 3D V-cache. It's a scheduling nightmare and frankly just a bad CPU that doesn't really make sense for gaming or productivity. If the focus is productivity, then the Ryzen 9 7900X for $390 is a far better choice. It's $100 cheaper and it's competitive with the Core i7 14700K, which costs slightly more at $400, though the KF version can be had for $390. Now, the 14700K is generally a little faster than the 7900X for core-heavy workloads, but we have observed it pushing total system power usage over 70% higher. So if you care at all about power efficiency, go with the Ryzen 9 part. It's in a different class. That said, if you're mostly gaming, then the 14700K is a much better product than the 7900X, but there's a problem for the i7. Again, the 7800X 3D, it's cheaper and faster. So again, if gaming is the focus, the 7800X 3D is what you want. In short, for around $400, the 7800X 3D is the best choice for gamers, or really that recommendation applies to any price point above $400. Then for productivity, the 7900X at $390 can't be beat, offering a good balance of performance and efficiency. Okay, so time for the Core i9 versus Ryzen 9 fight, and each team has a few options here. Firstly, let's just get this one out of the way. The 13th gen and 14th gen Core i9s, they're the same CPU, so there's really no point paying a premium for the newer 14th gen models. The only possible advantage of the 14th generation is Intel's APO, or Application Optimization Software feature, which can boost performance in games, though right now, it's still just 2 games, and frankly this looks to be more of a marketing stunt to push 14th gen chips on gamers than anything else. All of that said, as it stands right now, the 14900KF costs just $30 more than the 13th gen model, while the 14900K is just $40 more than the 13900K. So what amounts to less than a 10% premium, so it's probably worth just going with the 14th generation models. So that means the 14900KF at $550, the 7950X at $570, or the 7950X 3D at $580, along with the standard 14900K. In my opinion, you should spend the extra $30 to get the 14900K over the KF. It's a tiny premium to get that iGPU, which can be handy and it might hold its value a bit better. Then we have the 7950X 3D, which is just $10 more than the standard 7950X, so obviously you'd get the X3D model. So that means the options are the 14900K or the 7950X 3D, both for $580. And this is a pretty easy recommendation for me. Get the 7950X 3D, as it delivers similar productivity performance, generally a little bit better in our testing, and the power difference. It's insane. There's really no other way to put it. For example, running Cinebench, the 14900K system sucked down 533 watts, which was 92% more than that of the 277 watts consumed by the 7950X 3D. So as you can plainly see, the 14900K makes no sense for core-heavy productivity work. Then for gaming, the 7950X 3D, it's also faster, and while there's generally not much in it, the Ryzen CPU again uses less power, so a no-brainer really. Well, there you go. It's very interesting how things have changed over the past few years, with Intel being very competitive at the low end, but not so much at the high end. AMD's making some really nice inroads though with the Ryzen 5 7600 at $200, and hopefully it's still at that price by the time you actually watch this video. I think ideally, though, it does need to drop down to about $180 to really dominate that lower end market segment. For gaming, the 7800X 3D is just a massive headache for Intel. They've really got no way of combating it. It's such a specialized part, just really focused on delivering the best possible gaming performance. And at the high end, Intel falls victim to excessive power usage, and while some will claim that undervolting and reducing power targets is the way forward, truth be told, you are still getting better performance and much better efficiency with a Ryzen 9 processor, and with the current discounts, the 7950X 3D is impossible to ignore. And that is going to do it for this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do the YouTube stuff. And if you'd like to become a Hardware Unboxed community member, we have Floatplane Patreon, links in the video description. Click on either one of those and you'll get access to stuff like our monthly live streams, our exclusive Discord server, behind the scenes content, Q&As, a lot of cool stuff. So check it out if you're interested, but if not, that's perfectly fine. And I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.